Welcome to our New Deal podcast. I'm Zac.
I'm Nicole.
And today we're going to be looking at what just passed as of Thursday, March 11th. Joe Biden signed the new American COVID Rescue Plan, also known as the COVID-19 Relief Bill. And it's just historical. $1.9 trillion deal there. Some of the things that are in it are the $1,400 checks that Biden promised, a $3,000 child tax credit, $50 million for small businesses, increased unemployment benefits, $300 through the week of September 6th. And today we're just going to be talking about the highlights of it, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, and we're going to wrap it off with why the GOP didn't really vote for it. So Nicole, I'm going to ask you first here. Let's get it started. What were some things you did like about the COVID-19 bill?
So I think the big hot item in the bill is the stimulus checks. Everybody's kind of been talking about those $1,400 checks. And I think that's a good thing. I think a lot of people on the lower end of the income scale really need that. And I think they also needed more. So I like that they're doing a start with those stimulus checks. I wish they were a little higher for some people. There's also a lot of research and funding going into vaccines and vaccine distribution, which I think is really important. Like, that's going to be the main thing getting us out of this. So I feel like all our efforts should be going into that. I also like that they're increasing unemployment as well. I think that's important. What do you think about some of these areas?
One thing I really agree with, and I think the most important part of this bill is just the COVID vaccination. They're putting in a bunch of money for the CDC to market the vaccine, spread awareness for it, as well as setting up a bunch of sites throughout the country. No money is ever going to save America economically, especially with the debt that we're in. But one thing that is going to save us is the vaccine, and it's going to help people, get vaccinated, fight the virus, and just get back to normalcy. I think that's one of the big things. One of sort of my concerns with the $1,400 checks is who's getting these checks. Up to $75,000 a year in their annual income from either their 2020 taxes if they filed or 2019, they're eligible for this $1,400, and I feel like that number is just too high. If you're making $75,000 a year on at least your 2020 taxes, that's just way too much. You should be fine through this pandemic.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I agree that people who have a higher income probably don't need those checks. And I kind of wish that some of the checks that are going to people, above 75,000 or around there, I wish that more money was going to the lower income instead. But also it's kind of splitting hairs. Like, it's too difficult for the government to make that distinction over like who needs the checks and who doesn't. So that's why I'm kind of okay with how they're doing it so far. But again, I wish that they were bigger for the people who are really struggling.
Yeah, there's only so much the government can do there. They have to set a general range, and you can't include one person within that range and one person with not, especially with, income is so different from state to state. But one of the other things that I didn't like about the COVID-19 bill was them giving out money to local schools and everything to reopen. From the last COVID bill, there's still $1 trillion out there that hasn't been spent. And some of that money is supposed to go to schools to help reopening. And I know a lot of schools are starting to reopen, and schools definitely down south in more conservative areas have been reopened for a while now. So I think that money should have been used to go else places, maybe to give bigger checks to people who actually really need them. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know if that part was as necessary. I think schools reopening eventually when it's safe is important, but I feel like if we focus on vaccines and all that, then we're going to just cut the problem off at its core instead of trying to like reopen schools while this is still going on. So yeah, the vaccine area, as I said, is definitely the most important to me because that's really the way that we're going to end all this and the pandemic.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I feel like I should highlight here is the $50 billion for small businesses. I'm all for small businesses, and it sucks how much they got hurt through the pandemic. And I think this money is going to help them, jumpstart again. And they've already gotten so much money from the federal government through this past year and with the CARES Act and then other small loans that the government has given out. But I think small businesses they're the backbone of the economy. And I think we've got to keep them going and keep building them up.
Yeah, I think that's a good section. I know people have been talking about small businesses since the start. Like when there were the shutdowns to keep COVID under control, people were saying, well, what about small businesses? So I feel like they really got hit hard during this. So I think that's an important section of the bill. And I'm glad they got some aid there.
Yeah, when we're looking at just the bill itself, but not even that, just people who voted for the bill, there's been a 71% public support on both sides of the aisle in the population for this bill, but not one Republican representative, senator voted for this bill, and one House Democrat. He voted against the bill after two voted against it in the first time it was in the House. Joe Manchin was the key guy to get on this bill, but with the lowering of the unemployment to 300, they got him on board. And I think it's the biggest disappointment of this bill is that not one Republican voted for it.
Yeah, I think it's a little upsetting how it was split purely on party lines because it's like, are these representatives really voting for what they believe in, or are they just sticking with their parties? Obviously, they're just sticking with their parties, and I think that's kind of disheartening. Um, how it was just like a pretty clear party split.
Yeah, and Republicans actually didn't hate this bill as a whole. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, her amendment got thrown in the bill, and she still didn't vote for it. And as well as Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker, he actually really enjoyed the small business money there, the $50 billion. But I think it all comes down to his constituents in future elections and sticking with Donald Trump, because a lot of Donald Trump supporters within the Congress were very against the bill. They thought Trump did enough. They thought their $600 billion plan was enough, but I just don't think the $600 billion plan went enough.
Yeah, I mean, I will say from to try to be unbiased, there were obviously representatives on both sides who just stuck with their parties. Democrats voted along party lines as well. But I just think it's interesting how 71% of the public supported this bill. That's a pretty high number, but not a single Republican voted in support of it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely sad, and yes, I think the bill price tag should have been brought down a bit. I don't have the math to figure out how much it should be, and I understand Republicans were very leery on spending more money as possibly spending too much. But when you have an economy that's just already kind of down, and it's even going back up and has been going back up since the CARES Act, I think you got to inflate it a little to find that equilibrium.
Yeah, I think all in all, this is a good bill to try to get us back on our feet and to help the people who have really been hit hardest from this, like small businesses, people who are unemployed, low income people.
Yeah, and when we look back 2 weeks ago at where Joe Biden was at the beginning of his administration and his promises, he didn't really check off three of them out of the four we talked about. But this one is a big promise. Joe Biden, he ran his campaign off a COVID relief bill, $1,400 checks, and he's getting that to people. And I think that's one good thing about Biden, that he's doing that. But again, I'm still very disappointed that Biden could not get a single Republican to vote with this bill, even if it meant having to give up certain things within the bill that he was super strong about.
Well, I mean, I think because it passed without Republican support, I'm glad that he stuck to the things that he wanted to get into it. The one thing I will say is that some people are a little bit upset that these are $1,400 stimulus checks because Democrats were saying they would be $2,000 stimulus checks, and I know that because of the earlier $600 ones, that's why it's now down to 1,400. But I know some people wanted it to still be the full 2,000 at this point.
I think if there was one thing Biden should have gave up on this plan to get Republican support was those $1,400 checks. I think he should have dropped them down to 1,000. I think he would have had the support of a lot of moderate Republicans like Ben Sass of Nebraska and Mitt Romney, and even some moderates in the House of Representatives.
But what's the point in cutting down on those and, like sacrificing the help that he's giving to people just to get Republican support that he didn't even need?
Well, he ran his campaign off bipartisanship, and this right here, I don't know if this is a lack of bipartisanship from Joe Biden himself or just how split and polarized Congress is today, but I believe Joe Biden should have just tried to make better efforts to get that Republican support.
I mean, I don't know. I personally think that helping people is more important than bipartisan support. If the Republicans don't want to help people who are really struggling right now, then they can, vote along party lines. So I'm glad that it went this way instead of trying to become more bipartisan.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's good that a bill passed that's going to help the American people, and this might come back to haunt Republicans in 2022 midterms, or it's going to haunt Democrats in 22 midterms if Republican fears of inflation and doing too much is going to affect them. As always, we thank you for tuning in to our New Deal podcast. I'm Zach.
And I'm Nicole.